A leaked document has shed more insight into Beijing's internment of hundreds of thousands of Muslims. The BBC has seen a detailed record of more than 3,000 Uyghurs from Xinjiang province, including how they pray, how they dress and who they contact. The document is reportedly from the same source that leaked a batch of highly sensitive material published last year. It includes cases of Uyghurs being sent to internment camps for applying for passports. Beijing denies human rights abuses against the Uyghur population, insisting it is combating religious extremism.
Joining us live now is James Brown from the United States Studies Centre. James, thank you for your time. Now, what's alarming, not just the human rights abuses that we're seeing in Xinjiang, but also the continued denial of the Chinese government, even though all these leaks keep coming through.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is a more detailed picture of how this system of internment works, how these prison camps work, and what it is that gets people into the gaze of the Chinese authorities in Xinjiang. I mean, some of the details on this document that's been released talk about the issues and incidents that led them to bring these people into camps. Some of them are extraordinarily minor. A man, 34 years old, who clicked on a foreign internet website on his mobile phone. Not any particular website, just the fact that it was a foreign website. He clicked on it accidentally on his phone, so he says that's enough for him to come into contact with the authorities, to be detained, to be put in one of these camps. The second thing I think this shows is just the extent of the way that families are rounded up. So there's reference in these documents to people being brought in because of their associations and the number of family members brought in each case. There's discussion about Chinese authorities going into houses and really doing a stock take of how many Qurans there are, how much religious material there is, how many veils there are, to make a judgment on whether people are practicing Islam and therefore whether they're a threat to the Chinese state. It's very concerning information that's coming out today.
Yeah, the reach of Big Brother, as you say, so alarming. What are the realistic impacts of this, though? I mean, this cements what the world knows about this, and as you alluded to, the extent to which everyone is being swept up. But are there consequences for China? And if not right now, what will this look like for 10 years? Will China be successful in what it's trying to achieve?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt in the international community about what the Chinese Communist Party is trying to achieve in Xinjiang, or the methods it's employing to achieve that outcome. Nor the extent to which the Chinese Communist Party will go to protect itself. I mean, we've seen this week scholars being locked up for simply criticising the response of President Xi Jinping to the coronavirus. Publishing a critical comment or an article is enough to have you detained, to have your family and children detained. But I think despite all this information that's coming to light, we still have this cognitive dissonance where when we think about China, we seem to sort of suspend the political repression and suspend our understanding of what an authoritarian state it is, and instead focus on the positive aspects. And really we've got to be able to hold both at the same time and make informed judgments about how to deal with both the Chinese government but also the Chinese people too.
Absolutely, but that's a really interesting point you bring up there about President Xi Jinping and what he's been caught up with in the coronavirus, because there is this kind of tacit agreement in China that they're happy to continue as is because they have experienced such great growth and prosperity, greater wealth from what they experienced in the past. But an outbreak like this and the government not taking care of people's health really has the potential to undermine his authority at a time when he's really under pressure in domestic politics as it is.
Well, I think it goes to the question of trust. So people will give their political leaders a lot of latitude when they trust them. So if the economy is rising, if living standards are improving, if the country seems to be growing strength, then people are willing to give President Xi a lot of latitude in what he does. But what we've seen, I think, in the last couple of months is really quite a lot of criticism, a lot more than you would normally get in China. People taking risks to come out and say that they're not happy with the response of the Chinese government. They're not happy about the fact that the Chinese government seemed to know about coronavirus, at least at a provincial level, and took steps to stop any discussion of it. And that's what's really concerning. The kind of movement we've seen supporting Dr. Li Wenliang, that young doctor who was one of the first to raise the alarm, was rounded up by the police and then eventually died of the coronavirus, becoming a bit of a hero for speaking up and trying to save people's lives and not being focused on propaganda and just backing the government's narrative.
What does this do, this sort of irresponsibility, let's be frank about it, from the Chinese government and the response to Corona, and the willingness to, you know, make it all, as long as President Xi looks good out of it, that's the main thing. To anyone looking to, you know, partake in any form of resistance in China, is there growing opposition, do you think, and how can that manifest, or is the state just too strong?
Well, look, I think the control of Xi himself is so strong. So there used to be some degree of divergence of political opinion. Some influential figures around former leader Jiang Zemin had some concerns about the style of leadership that Xi Jinping was bringing to China and the direction he was taking the party in. But those voices have been quietened for a long time now. There's not a lot of political rivals to Xi Jinping. The corruption purges that went through the government and went through the PLA particularly took out a number of the voices that might have been that might have been alternative sources of power. So you've got a president who's very entrenched, very strong. The only challenge to that is going to be the public losing faith. And it's issues like this, the coronavirus. It was a high-speed train crash in Shanghai a number of years ago where the extent of the disaster was covered up. It's those sorts of issues that really start to foment resentment amongst the Chinese people.
Also goes to show how quickly the Chinese can shut things down if they don't like the look of it. But it's also interesting to note for Australia's interaction with China at the moment. There has been a discussion this week with a lift out in the Nine papers for China Daily, one of their propaganda pieces, and some very outspoken critics within Nine as well.
Yeah, look, Chris Uhlmann has made some comments about the appropriateness of Fairfax newspapers carrying supplements for the China Daily, and I think it's spot on. I mean, this has been going on for so long in Washington, in Ottawa, in Wellington and here in Sydney. That newspaper should not be carrying Chinese propaganda that looks like news. And you speak to people, when they pick it up, they think it's a part of the newspaper. They don't understand that it's paid advertising by the propaganda department of a communist government. So I think it's really time for Fairfax to end that arrangement with China Daily. It compromises their independence. They're carrying propaganda for a foreign government in a way they wouldn't allow for the Australian government. So Chris Uhlmann's comments are spot on.
It's pretty jarring every time you open the paper and that falls out. It's hard to believe it's falling out of an Australian newspaper, as you mentioned, James Brown. So I don't think you'd be alone in thinking that. Just finally, we're talking a new European push, perhaps more combination about European power. These are comments from President Macron. Coming, I suppose, really, because of where they see the US and as a less reliable partner in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, the Munich Security Conference in the last couple of days, one of the significant security leader events around the world on the calendar, and a lot of divergence between the Europeans. The Germans talking about the decline of US power, the fact that the US is not interested anymore in shaping the world towards a positive and beneficial outcome. Secretary Pompeo giving his remarks and talking about the importance of national sovereignty, kind of missing the mood in the room a little bit, and the French leader Macron talking about a strengthened France, potentially willing to extend security guarantees to its allies around it. So we're seeing quite a lot of change, quite a lot of discussion about the future of the West and the future of Western security as well in the face of challenges from Russia and China and elsewhere.
James Brown, always good to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.